Это мир Авито, где я продаю эффективно. Ведь каждый день здесь ищут авто более 3 миллионов пользователей по всей стране. Продвигаю объявления, изучаю аналитику, регулирую цены, и все это на едином сервисе.
Откройте все возможности Авито для вашего бизнеса.
Hello, Lloyd.
Alrighty.
How are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm doing well.
Very nice to meet you. And first of all, on behalf of the Russian automotive community, we would like to thank you for an opportunity to publish your book and share your knowledge with the Russian automotive community and Russian dealers. And at the same time, I want to congratulate you because I noticed that your book, I think last week, was the #1 release in business insurance. So it's a great achievement. There's no doubt about it. #1 book in the business insurance. So what we do is before we publish these books, we make a webinar presentation by an author. And this is why we thank you for your time and an opportunity to present the book. So the first question comes sort of naturally. I read your book and you've been in business for many years. How did you end up in automotive business? What made you interested in cars?
It was by accident. I was my first semester in college, and my friends that were graduating from the prior year, acquaintances, older brother, specifically a friend of mine, had gotten out of college, and the income levels were not real attractive. And I was like, all right, well, with the college degree, how much are you making per year? And it wasn't great. And at the same time, a very good friend of mine was in New Jersey, and he was selling Hondas. And at that point in time, he was making $900 a week. And I was just a kid. And the idea of $900 a week, to me, at that point in time, when I was starving, just to get by, I thought, oh my God, if I could do that for a little while, that would be amazing. So I hopped in my car and I drove up to New Jersey, and I lived in my friend's basement for a little while, and I started selling cars. He got me a job at the dealership. And during that period of time, I fell in love with F&I. I had a F&I manager that was, maybe if you looked up the definition of cool in the dictionary, it was this guy. He was just really laid back, and the bank would say something like declined on an application that we'd sent over, and he'd be like, oh, don't worry about that. Just I'll talk to him after lunch, and he would pick up the phone, and I would listen to him have those calls. And just the dialogue and the friendship and the education of being able to look at the app and the credit bureau and tell the story and get the buyer at the bank to change his position and to approve a deal that was previously declined. I thought that was the most fascinating aspect of the car business. I loved the fact that they were using the relationship, but also, leveraging a few things like, we're doing $10 million a month in business with your bank. I need you to take a second look at this app for me, please. Here's what happened with the customer. You go out and you sit and you visit with the customer, or you visit with me and ask me to run down the story of what had happened, leading to that customer's credit history. And I just really loved that aspect of it. It wasn't so much about selling the products in the beginning as it was really working and leveraging those relationships with the banks. I got attracted to that part of the job.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, including I've been in car business for 30 years, and I know a lot of people in car business, and a lot of people say that we got in the car business by an accident. But once you get in it, you usually stay in it for life. At least a lot of people that I know devote their life to car business. Lloyd, can you tell us about your formal education? How did that help you, if any, in your F&I efforts?
Well, from a formal education standpoint, I'm not degreed. So I had, again, the first semester in school, I got out of my first semester, was beginning the second semester, and thought, I'm going to go in the car business for a few years instead of racking up a lot of debt. And by the way, what I wanted to major in wasn't really going to be, I was following the path of other people that I knew, and those other people were, again, taking jobs now. They were out of college, and the jobs just didn't pay that well. So, I went into the car business. I sold cars for a little while, and then while learning how to sell cars, one of the things that was very unique back then, and you don't have it today with the privacy laws and everything, but salespeople, we would pull the credit bureau on our customer ourselves, and then we would take that to the sales manager. And I got very fascinated with how credit worked. And they had a little pamphlet by our credit bureau machine, which was a little fax paper machine. You'd type in the information and it would just spit out. But it was a glossary, if you will, of how to read the file. And I kind of got obsessed with that for a little while. I wanted to understand everything about credit bureaus so that I could kind of understand what was going on with my customers. And I ended up going back to Florida a few months later, and I ended up taking a job as a buyer for a mortgage company. And what I had learned from reading credit bureaus and learned from filling out credit applications and started to understand debt to income ratios and payment to income ratios and everything else, it helped me in that aspect. Years later, I was a buyer for a mortgage company for 3 years. Years later, I applied for a job for a rep for an automotive finance company. And it was the funniest thing, because when I was interviewing with the guy, he said, "Okay, so you sold cars before?" I said, "Yeah, I sold cars, not for a long time." And he goes, "But you know what an F&I manager is?" I'm like, "Yeah, F&I managers are the coolest guys on the planet." He's like, "You have the job." And then they hired me. And I went to work for an automotive finance company. And then that company eventually, the way they were buying paper was very aggressively. One day they ran out of money. And I walked into Bill Curry Ford in Tampa, Florida, which was one of my major clients then. And I got hazed by the F&I managers in the store for a few minutes. They were like, "Oh, you don't have a job. Your company, you guys, all those bad loans, you ran out of business." And it was kind of funny for a few minutes. And I was a little hurt by it, because I was like, "How could you guys be so heartless?" I lost my job. But then they said, "Well, it looks like you need a job. We would like you here. Do you want to start?" And instantly I found myself in the F&I department. But at that point, it was a great opportunity to get into, because having bought paper for several years before that and understanding banking and lending guidelines, it became the foundation of what I did. It made me a lot more effective in that store than I would have been had I just been a salesperson and made my way into F&I.
I'm glad that you said that you shared the story with us, because just as a lot of people got in the car business by accident, a lot of very successful people like yourself have gotten into car business without formal education, and their education was the car business. Just
very much so.
We have some of our authors like Chris Martinez, who got his education through going through different jobs, through different dealerships, and he became a leading expert on sales. But anyway, that's an interesting, good point. Lloyd, tell us about, you're obviously a consultant with F&I, or writing a book about F&I. What exactly do you do right now? What exactly is your relationship with F&I department? Do you work for any certain dealer group, or do you do consulting? What do you do with F&I opportunities?
So I own a company called the Consator Group. And what we do is we do everything from the F&I training with, and we'll do F&I training for accounts that we don't actually service. But we also do products, vehicle service contracts, GAP, you name it. And we also develop products. So if we're working with a new client, we're going to entertain one of the 6 different administrators that we currently work with. Either they're off-the-shelf products, or maybe we develop something new for that dealer that really fits perfectly into the culture of what that dealer's trying to do. And the reason I say that we do that is because, I'll give you 2 different, I'll give you an instance of 2 different dealers. So I'm sitting with one dealer. He owns 25, 30 different rooftops. A lot of them are high-end stores. He's in 3 different states. Very well-established dealer. We're having lunch. He's eating a chicken Caesar salad like he always does. And we're talking about the service contract that he has in all of his stores, whether or not we keep the thermostat as a covered item. And because he participates in the monies that are not paid out in claims, he gets those monies back the way that his deal's structured. You know, he's chewing and he goes, "Oh yeah, take out the thermostat," you know, and the way that would work is you don't cover consequential and subsequential damage. So if the thermostat fails and it causes the engine to overheat, then the engine claim is not paid either, but it's more lucrative to this guy. And that's just one way of seeing the transaction, is to maximize the dollar amount in it. While another dealer across town owns 6 Ford stores. I'm working with him as well. In the middle of our conversation about the service contracts, he shares with me that everything needs to be covered for his customer because he sleeps well at night knowing that he takes great care of his customers. So on one hand, you have the guy that's the relationship guy. On the other guy, you have, you know, the idea that wants to maximize profit. Not that one's better than the other. They're both very, very nice guys. But what we find ourselves doing from a training aspect is that we have to kind of nuance our training in different directions to kind of fit in perfectly to the culture of that store, because the dealer has a vision, but the dealer's vision, this dealer's vision, might be radically different than the other dealer's vision. So we kind of have to flesh that out, and then we build everything that we do around helping them achieve that vision.
So you have a consulting company, and you don't sell the off-the-shelf, don't only sell off-the-shelf products, but you also go around and try to custom tailor those products to the specific needs and the specific ways that the dealer approaches customers and the relationship with the customers. You just mentioned the thermostat, and one dealer wants to use it as a sort of a wear and tear item, and no coverage on that. And the other dealer would like to sleep well and have everything covered on the customer's car. So these are 2 completely different approaches, and you want to have an opportunity to fit your model, your sales model, your service model into with both visions. And just as you said, not that one is better than the other, they're just different.
No, they have different goals. And, you know, if I am doing my best job to serve the client, then what I want to do is help them achieve those goals. You know, I don't have any judgment in it. I do recognize that there are a certain amount of best practices that we can have with their F&I department. And so I'm going to understand what the dealer's goals are. We're going to talk about that, and then we're going to try and introduce the best practices into the F&I department in a way that's going to help that dealer achieve those goals.
Right. I agree with you. I actually agree with you. And, you know, I remember those back back in the days, like JM&A. They're the company that have different, the wide range of products, and they're a larger company, and they try to custom tailor their products to different needs. Let's talk about F&I. F&I has emerged in the United States about, what, I'd say 30, 40 years ago. There was no F&I. Dealers were concentrating on just selling cars. You want to get the money, go to your bank. They were selling and servicing cars. Then F&I went through some changes, like first it was Wild West, you know, when the customers were, they were not disclosing the figures and the interest rates. And then there was a period when there was a sort of a wave of lawsuits and litigation with between the attorney general and the dealers. And now it became F&I's role right now is one of the key departments in the dealerships, and that's one of the drivers of the loyalty, customer loyalty, and customer retention. So how would you describe, you've been in this business long enough, how how do you feel F&I department has changed over the last 20, 30 years, or however long you have been doing it?
Well, I can speak to a little bit longer than I've been doing it. A gentleman that got me, actually, a gentleman by the name of Bill Fisher, who recently passed away. Bill was the president of Pat Ryan and Associates years ago, and in the late 70s, he was what they would call a rent-a-pro. He would go around to dealerships and that didn't have F&I departments and sit in the chair and say, look, we're going to build an F&I department for you because it's a different revenue source for your store that you don't currently have. Right now, you're giving that money to the bank. And the idea that you're going to build an F&I department also came with the idea that you're going to sell credit insurance at that point of the sale, because you're trying to figure out how you can add another profit center. And then you started leveraging those relationships with banks so that you start getting reserve. Or a percentage of the finance, if the terminology of reserve is not common. So that has changed to the point where in the 70s there was very little disclosure, if any. And really in the 1990s, there wasn't a lot of that going on either. I know for a fact that I used to, on my menus back in the 90s, I didn't use a menu per se. I would flip over the back of the deal jacket and I would write, 60, 66, and 72 with warranty and gap. And then I'd write 60, 66, and 72 with warranty only. And then I'd put a little question mark next to 66 and 72. And I just flip it over and show it to the customer and say, guys, here are your options. What would you like to do? And they'd say, well, what's the payment on that? Because there's a question mark there. And this is something that I was taught to do. And I say, I'm glad you asked. And I just punch it into the computer and we would just have conversations. So the type of disclosure was radically different. And we started to see this happen in the mid 90s where, some of these bigger F&I companies were worried, well, shouldn't say that. Some of the bigger dealer groups were worried about the allegations of payment packing. And payment packing, for those that don't know, is when we give somebody a payment, but that payment already includes F&I products in it. And so they were worried about lawsuits, and there were a few big ones that were happening then. So everybody started getting in this mindset of compliance. All right, let's be compliant with Regulation Z. Let's be compliant that we're making sure that we disclose our truth in lending to our customers so they know what their APR is. Let's make sure that we give the customer a base payment without products built into it, and that we can show a history of having done that. So there aren't allegations of doing business in a unethical manner, and that became a big part of what was happening in, let's say, the late 90s and the early 2000 period of time. And then F&I shifted again in 2008 because everybody's walking around with a smartphone, and while they've got their smartphone, they have an app, and that app gives the customer a payment, and that app another app gives the customer values on cars. So the business is constantly having to shift to kind of work with the market and work with legal compliance and make sure that they're being able to communicate in a way with the customer that resonates well with the customer, but also keeping legal compliance the entire time. And there's a lot more attention on it now than there's ever been, I think. We saw entities like the CFPB, which was charging, from 2012 to around 2016, we saw this entity of the government really kind of emerging in a way that it was having a lot to do with the lending institutions and having some impact on dealers. And then during the Donald Trump administration, that kind of went by the wayside. But now with Biden in, they've appointed a new director, and we expect the legal compliance, at least in the United States, to get really of paramount importance over the next several years.
What's the entity name? I haven't heard of that. What's
the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau,
the
CFPB.
Okay. I didn't hear it. Okay, I was Consumer Financial Protection Agency.
And so that agency, not to to run off on a tangent or anything, but they had a report called Auto Add-ons, and that came out in, let's say, 2014, and it was presented to Congress to talk about how they want to restructure the automotive business. And one part of it, there's an example in there of a dealer in Baltimore that had asked for $2,500 down from a customer. In return, they were going to get her a minivan for a payment of like $330 a month. And so the dealer went to auction, bought the car, came back and said, okay, I know I told you $330 a month, but I actually can't sell it to you for $330. It's going to be $425. And by the way, you have to buy these F&I products, extended warranty, gap, etc. And so the woman that gave the down payment, she said, I can't do that. I can't afford that payment. It's too high. And the dealer said, well, if you don't buy the car at that, then I'm not going to give you back your money. That the probability of a transaction like that happening at 99.9% of the dealers in America, it would never happen. If the customer didn't buy, they would simply get their money back.
Sure.
But this one instance, it was a terrible instance, it's a really poor way to treat the customer, became the example that the CFPB put forth in front of Congress to say that this is how businesses our dealers are conducting business. And it's simply not true. But people that aren't in the car business, when they read that, they go, oh, well, this was an awful thing that happened to that woman. Maybe we need to entertain changing the laws. And so we're in this weird kind of time where I'm wondering what's coming down the pipe right now from a compliance standpoint.
Yeah, one bad apple can do a lot of damage to a lot of good dealers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, let's talk about your book. I see it in the background. I don't have the Russian version yet. It's going to be coming out of the printing house soon. Yes, I read the book. I don't want to talk too much about it. We want our readers to read it. It's a great book. It's very interesting, and there's a lot of value in it, the way I see it. But there's one interesting thing about it that I noticed. Right now are the times of changes. Everybody's talking about technologies, digital sales, going online, this and that and the other thing. Your book, Art of F&I, is putting an accent not on modern technologies, not on digitalization, not on certain, but on a very basic level of trust with the customer. That's the emphasis that you are putting in your book. Build the trust. Then you get an opportunity to make money. Then you get an opportunity to retain this customer. Then you get the customer loyalty. So would you call this approach a step back or a step forward? How would you rate it yourself, the going back to basics?
I think you have to do that. The reason that dealers like Carvana or dealers like Vroom are emerging in the way that they are is that they are making some transparency so the customer can sit on their digital device and figure out what a payment's going to be and stuff. And so customers are attracted to that transparency. You know what I mean? They're looking for something that they can put their trust into. And so it's easy to do that from a digital format because you can put the information in. That doesn't mean that they should trust that. Whenever you look at the transactional data of a company like Carvana or something, and you can put the same year, make, and model in the Carvana screen, and you'll bring out 20 Honda Accords. And you could do that in a different platform like Car Gurus, and you'll find another 20 Honda Accords that are all coming from your local dealers. And on average, the pricing at the local dealer is head and shoulders above that of Carvana. But people still go to Carvana because they trust the transparency in there, even though they're not actually vetting to find out if it's the best price. They're willing to overlook the price because they feel the comfort in that transaction. And so when I look at what we're doing in the F&I office, and the reason I wrote the book is because I'm trying to introduce that back into the F&I department on a very personal level. Yes, you can do that through your technology if you want to do it. That's fine. Dealers will. There's going to be a segment of customers that are going to use that technology and buy, and that's because that's where they feel that they can trust the process the most. But if we can introduce the behaviors that generate trust back into our dealerships on a personal level, so that when I meet you, and in the first couple minutes that we're spending time together, you can go, hey, this guy's all right. He seems to know what he's talking about. He seems pretty good. He's not like other salespeople. Then you'll extend some trust to me. And if you extend some trust to me and we have a good interaction with each other, then maybe you become a customer for life. But what has happened in a lot of stores are, because I'm an F&I manager that is only thinking about my PVR, which is my per vehicle retail, or how much money I make per transaction, or what my product penetration is, or whatever my quotas are. And I get that in my mind, and that's what I'm thinking about. And if I'm thinking about that while I'm sitting across from you as a customer, and all I'm thinking about is me the whole time, the narrative of that transaction is going to change, and you're going to feel it. You're not going to feel like I'm there to help you. You're going to feel like I'm there to sell you on something. And the moment that you start to feel like that, you're going to withdraw a little bit of trust from me. Now, if you withdraw trust enough, then we don't even have a transaction. If you withdraw trust a little, you don't buy any products. If you withdraw trust just a little bit, well, I might be inclined to go ahead and start discounting my products. And the problem with doing that is I've just informed you that I tried to hit you for more than I needed to hit you for. So now you're looking at me like, oh, well, if you could sell it to me for $2,000, why'd you ask for $3,000? And all of it stems from these behaviors that we do. So if we go back to the basics and we add, and there's two things that we have to add, and the book really kind of addresses. You have the thinking self and the feeling self. And so the feeling self is what makes the decision. The thinking self doesn't get involved until later on. The thinking self will justify or rationalize the decision, but the feeling self, or your gut feeling, is what determines whether or not you buy a product. So if I'm sitting across from you and I'm not doing something that resonates well with you, that part that's in your gut, that feeling self, that is going to say, hold on, slow down. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, and I read your book, and that's why I said it's a great book. It's let me just underscore what you just said, because it's very important. It's a key to this knowledge. Is you're not against the technologies, you're not against digitalization. You're totally in line with online sales tools and everything else. But at the very basic level, when the dealership is doing business with the customer, there should be a level of trust. And before this basic level of trust is established, none of these technologies will really help. And by building this level of trust, then on top of it, you can pile up the technologies, you can sell the products, and you can increase the customer satisfaction, loyalty, and make money. So that's basically the general idea of your book. And in your book, I'll give a little bit of a heads up, you show exactly the way the dialogue should be held, what methods you should be used. You actually it's actually very interesting. When I was reading your book, sometimes when the customer say, asking you a question where, I shouldn't say all of the F&I guys, but many of F&I guys will start sort of a fight. You're suggesting, if the customer doesn't want to buy something, you just say, fine, yes. And that would be to resolve a possible confrontation. So it's a very interesting point. So the basics are there to be built on.
If I may, it's not exactly fine and yes. I mean, it is, because if I have a customer, so there's a couple things that would happen. If I put a menu of products in front of the customer, I'm paying attention, because if the customer never looks at the offer, if they don't look at it, if they say no from the beginning, then they're saying no. Again, that's a feeling. That's your feeling self that says no. If you look at it, you lean in, you look at the menu, you see what's covered, for how long is it covered, how many miles is it, what does it cost, what does it do to my payment, things like that, then that's the thinking self that's engaged. That's a very different objection, if you will. The thinking person looks at it and goes, oh, no, I think I can afford to fix my car for less than this amount of money. No, thank you. Or it's going to move the payment around a little bit too much or something. But if the customer says no without reviewing the information, then I know the objection is coming by way of feeling. So they're not saying no to the product, they're saying no to me. You know what I mean? So I have to get through that first. That is by far the most important thing, but it also, it fuels the way that they feel about the store afterwards. So if I argue with them when they say no, then by arguing with them, we're creating confrontation. I don't want to trigger that. You know what I'm saying? So if they do say no to something, I might have a menu in front of them and I'll just slide it off to the side and I'll keep going paperwork, but I leave it on the desk. Because what happens is once they're over the threat that I'm going to keep pushing them, most of the time the customer will lean over and pull it towards them and start taking a look at it, because the feeling self can calm down. Now the thinking self goes, what's on that paper? And so they'll pull it over and they'll look and they'll go, what does this cover? I said, well, it covers blah, blah, blah. And they've asked me the question. And now we're back and now we have a dialogue again, so many times the customer shuts down. It's because they're feeling some fear about the transaction and they're engaged in that fight or flight. And so they say no, which is a fight, or they say something like, can I think about it? Or do I have to make a decision today? Which is flight. They're trying to run away from making the decision. And neither one of those are a good place for me as an F&I manager to be, because I'm sitting across from someone that's scared. They're scared to even look at the data. They're scared of the transaction. They're scared of me. So how can I disarm that? Hey, no problem. I'll just put that over here. Let's continue with your paperwork. And I'll put an odometer statement or something like that in front of them that's completely non-threatening. And we just kind of go. And then they'll see and they'll go, all right, well, let me take a look at this now, because now the thinking side goes, what's that say?
What I liked what you just said. They're not saying no to the product. They're saying no to me. And that's a key to what you are teaching, is that you got to build a relationship so they don't say no to you. They always ready to. They know they want the warranty. I remember in your book you said that, listen, more warranty is better for anything. So it's just that you have to sell yourself so they don't say no to you.
Это мир Авито, где я продаю эффективно. Ведь каждый день здесь ищут авто более 3 миллионов пользователей по всей стране. Продвигаю объявления, изучаю аналитику, регулирую цены, и все это на едином сервисе.
Откройте все возможности Авито для вашего бизнеса.
Lloyd, here's a good question. I want to tell you just a few words about our project. We are publishing books by renowned leading authors on and experts of various sides of aspects of car dealership operations, including sales, marketing, service, F&I. And there's a lot of interest towards the advanced methods right now in Russia. The sponsor of our project is a company called Avito Auto. They're the largest classified site in Russia. They actually the second largest classified site in the world after Craigslist, and they are an official partner of ROAD, which is a Russian equivalent of NADA. And they support automotive community dealers, and they want everybody to be successful. That's why they support this project. So this question comes from them. And the question is, we spoke about your book, we spoke about your methods, we spoke about the how you feel you should be approaching the customer in the sales and F&I department. Could you tell us about a specific, you don't have to name names, if you want to, you can, but a specific business case when the methods that you speak about in your book were applied.
Mhm.
How long did it take to see the results, and what were the results?
So, it's a woman who is roughly my age, and she was a director for a big auto group. And we had visited, and she was sharing with me that her numbers were not that good. It was a Ford Point, and she was running around $1,300 to $1,500 a copy, and that's what the store was doing on average. And
In F&I,
wh-
1,300.
yes,
It's
yes,
not that bad.
and no, it's not bad, but her presentations were falling flat with customers, and so we spent about 3 hours just going through some of the things that are in the book, and well, really a lot of the things are in the book, and just reintroducing a sense of nobility into what she was doing. Because when she's sitting there the entire time thinking about what can I make on the next customer, what can I sell them, how much can I make, what can I sell them, you can think about that, and there's a practical purpose for thinking about how much money you can make on people. By all means, businesses have revenue goals. However, when you're sitting across from the customer, if that's what's on your mind, you're not going to connect with them. So we talked about the economics of the average American buyer, the fact that 78% of Americans live check to check. There's very little money in savings for emergencies. And we started unpacking, the cost of when you look at companies like AutoZone, O'Reilly, and Advanced Auto Parts on the stock exchange, you know, and I put this in the book as well. If I had $1 in the NASDAQ composite, it would have, it went up, I think, $1.20. If I would have had that same dollar in any one of those 3 auto parts stores, it would have went up between 3 to 11 times return on investment over that 10-year period. And so when you start looking at that, you go, well, how can auto parts companies have all that success? Well, clearly cars break, and that's where that comes from. So introducing the financial component into it, and then introducing the concept and just adopting this. Instead of trying to sell, I'm trying to help. That's it. About 3 hours later, I leave. The end of the month, she finishes up at $2,500 per copy. She moved her warranty penetration from the low 40s to the mid 60s, and it was just a matter of reframing what it is she does. She started having a good time with her customers again, and all of this by just reconnecting the dots. So it doesn't happen with everybody like that. I'd like to share with you this story, like, hey, read my book. If you do, you'll be the greatest F&I manager ever. I would argue that if you apply what's in the book, yeah, it's absolutely going to improve not just your numbers in F&I, but likely your relationships with everybody in your life, because the fundamentals in it are just solid. However, if you're reading that book and going, how can I make more money on people? Then it's a different thing, because you have to, that's important. Making the money is important, but at the same time, you have to think about the customer's experience also, because people that don't have a good experience, they don't come back for oil changes and service. They don't come back to replace that car when it's time. They don't tell their friends and family about the great experience that they had at the dealership. So you have to take your revenue goals and subordinate them just a little bit to the customer's experience. And if that means that the customer comes in and they don't buy anything, sometimes that happens, and you still have to make sure that they had an excellent experience with you. You know what I mean?
I completely relate to what you're saying, and it's a very interesting point. I actually never thought of that, to compare to make a convincing case of how the parts stores are improving their performance on the stock market, and use that as an example of the cars breaking. And It's really interesting to understand that once the F&I manager, who wasn't doing that bad, 1,500 per car, is along the line with an average in US, maybe just a hair less than an average, but within 3 hours, by pointing out to her mentality, or to rather an opportunity to change the mentality, she managed to, within a very short period of time, I think you said within 30 days or so, she managed to almost double the amount of profit, increase her warranty penetration by 50%, from 40 to 60%. And probably along with that came out, happier customers came out of the dealership. Now, Lloyd, I have a last question, and this is a very important question, because I actually like what you just said, that this is not just about F&I. The same approach may be applied with service department or with F&I, with sales department. Sort of step away from a transactional based philosophy and go to a customer-centric philosophy. You know, everything is around the customer, not around the transaction. You know, they can make an RO for $500 and laugh their way out when the customer is leaving, but you're never going to see this customer again. It's better to do a repetitive business, recurring business with the customers. This book is going to come out very soon in Russia. It's obviously a book about F&I, or rather about the art of F&I. However, with what you just said, the mentality-driven approach may be applied to sales, service, or some other areas of car dealership operations, or maybe even OEM operations. Who should be the recipients of this book? Who should be the audience of this book? Should it be just F&I people? Should that be a sales manager? Should that be a general manager? Should that be the owner? Who should be reading this book?
So the book is written with the language of F&I. You know, it is written for F&I managers. So many of the information in it really addresses them directly. However, when you start looking at the broader parts of it, specifically Chapter 1 and building trust and understanding the thinking self and the feeling self and how that works, and Chapter 4 on purpose and understanding what your purpose is and what you hope to achieve with others, I would say that the principles in the book can be applied to any other human that you are going to have a relationship with. You know, I mean, ultimately, you know, anything that's meaningful with any other humans are about, you know, you have relationships, but without communication and meaningful communication, you're not going to have a meaningful relationship with anybody. So being able to understand how the thinking and the feeling self work, and being able to understand what your core purpose is, you know, these things are super important whenever you're interacting with anyone, you know. So I'll give you an example of that. Is from the F&I standpoint, is that I know my purpose is to help the customer. I know my purpose is to create an excellent experience for the customer. That guides me whenever I start working with the transaction. But when I take that mentality into my family life or my personal life or the transaction that I'm having with, you know, somebody when I buy a cup of coffee or something like that, that everything I'm going to do, I do with this purpose of being genuine and being thoughtful with everybody, because that's who I want to be. You know, that resonates with people, and the little interaction that you have with you know, the experience that you have with that person, every person, any person, you know, it improves whenever you go into it knowing what your purpose is. You know what I mean? And when you understand how the thinking and feeling self are, it helps you be a better judge of what other people's behaviors are too, because sometimes people will act and you see this particularly in the car dealership. People are afraid of being taken advantage of, so they come in and they're aggressive, or they're obnoxious, or they're rude, or they're pushy, or whatever. And if I respond and I'm aggressive and pushy and stuff too, then we have no transaction. It's going to fall apart. And if it does come together, it's begrudgingly going to come together at a low price that doesn't represent a lot of profit, and the customer's still probably not going to be happy. But if I understand there's some fear running around in this customer's head, nobody's going to act like that. They're being completely unreasonable. They must be afraid of the situation. I'm going to demonstrate what my purpose is in a way that will help them relax a little bit, and we're going to get there. And I'll just use kid gloves with the customer and demonstrate that I actually care, that I'm not like another salesperson, that I'm here to serve them. And once they pick up on that, then hopefully they go, oh, Lloyd's not like those other salespeople we met, and they'll feel comfortable. But I can apply that to every other relationship that I have in my life or with anybody else.
It's a great answer. Actually, I never even thought of that, but what you just said confirmed my opinion. I didn't want to put the words in your mouth, but this is this approach. This is not just a customer-centric approach, but this is I would even call it a trust and relationship-centric approach. It goes beyond F&I, beyond the dealership, beyond the OEMs. It actually, the book, I don't want to name it, but it may actually be, it's not just an art of F&I, it's an art of relationship with a customer. It's an art of trust. And the knowledge that the experience, the tools that you offer can be expanded in various interactions between people. Lloyd, I want to thank you very much again for your time, for introducing your book, again, for an opportunity for us to print it, to publish it in Russia. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest. And maybe when this travel restrictions are over, maybe you will get an opportunity to come to Russia. It's a beautiful country, and we will get a chance to introduce you to some very interesting people in car business, and you will be able to see how it works in this country.
I would be delighted.
Это мир Авито, где я продаю эффективно. Ведь каждый день здесь ищут авто более 3 миллионов пользователей по всей стране. Продвигаю объявления, изучаю аналитику, регулирую цены, и все это на едином сервисе.
Откройте все возможности Авито для вашего бизнеса.